Okay, so we have our second work of French realism here. This is Olympia by Manet, not Monet, Manet. We're still in the mid 1800s. It's oil on canvas. So as you look at this, of course, the first two things that you should think about or that should come to your mind when you're looking at this is thinking both of Venus of Urbino as well as Le Grand Odalisque, right? We have a female nude here, and they're all in similar situations in that they're all lying in some fashion on a bed of some kind. So what we want to do is we want to see, okay, so what is similar uh, between this piece and Venus of Urbino and this piece and Le Grand Odalisque? Obviously, when I think about the background and the division of the background, this in particular right here should remind you a lot of Venus of Urbino because it's really being cut in half, basically in the same place that Venus of Urbino was, and drawing you to the same part of the body. And so there are a number of other compositional elements that should remind you of the other works. However, there's so much difference, right? Think about how she is portrayed, how her body is portrayed, how her face is portrayed, how her skin is portrayed. Um, think about the linens here. These don't look like the soft, luxurious linens that we saw in either of the other paintings, right? We also we have a domestic worker who is obviously bringing her flowers. Who are the flowers from? We would imagine they're probably from one of her suitors. What kind of suitor she will have, we'll talk about in just a moment. So we do have domestic help here, which we do also have in Venus of Urbino, but it's very different, right? You think about, okay, so I've got a pet here, but it's not a dog, it's a cat, right? And so what does a cat represent in opposition to what a dog represents, right? So you want to keep all of that stuff in mind and think about it deeply before you even try to watch the video, right? So see what you can come up with before you watch the video. And then, as you might have guessed, this woman is not a wife like Venus of Urbino is understood to be, and she is also not a member of a faraway, faraway harem. But she's in fact a prostitute in Paris. Olympia was a very common kind of prostitute name, like there are certain names that one would associate with people, with prostitutes, right? And Olympia happened to be one of them. So, so this was extremely controversial when it came out, as was, again, those realist painters were really working on defying what is expected from the Academy. We saw that the Romantic painters did that as well, but the realist painters are really, really anti-Academy. Okay, so the idea of the beautiful female nude, which I know we have said is controversial, is controversial. By this point, the female nude was considered a beautiful, wonderful thing and totally idealized and was a completely acceptable subject of art in the Academy. People didn't think of it as necessarily entirely scandalous. However, what happens here is the artist takes the idea of the female nude and makes her something not beautiful, not ideal, not beautiful, not ideal, but in fact an actual person that the people living in Paris would have come across, right? Especially the men living in Paris, these nice middle and upper middle class men who take their wives to the art show, as was the fashion, right? You go see art, right? And instead of seeing a beautiful idealized nude that no one would ever actually see in real life, they are confronted with a prostitute that, yeah, some of these men would have seen. And maybe the wives know it, maybe they don't, maybe they just accept it, but it was uncomfortable and it was deliberately uncomfortable. Okay. So we want to keep all of that in mind, do that as you think about that. Compare, contrast the composition of this work with the composition of and content of Venus Urbino and Le Grand Odalisque, and then watch the video. Okay.